So our first speaker today, Bill Collins, Chairman of Questor Tangent Corporation. Questor is the leading designer and manufacturing of electronic systems for passenger rail vehicles in North America. Bill joined Questor's Marine Division in 1995 and was tasked with bringing the company's fledgling sonar product line to market. Through the last 8 years as COO, Bill ran the operations of an advanced manufacturer growing at 15% annually. Bill and I have mucked around with trying to integrate technology, education, industry for better part of 20 years. And so he's very passionate about how those three pieces fit together and how they can more efficiently fit together. He's a great speaker. We're very fortunate and honored to have him. Bill Collins, thank you.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Barry. Thank you for inviting me today. Ladies and gentlemen, how is it that a coxswain on the INS Darvekshak, surveying in the Trincomalee Channel in southern India, can use the same software elements as the person driving a train in Kuala Lumpur, or indeed, maintenance manager in Vancouver? Ladies and gentlemen, that's innovation. When I first started to look at this, I thought, well, maybe there's an analogy that can be used. So I look at it as somewhat of a highway, of an intersection of two highways, in fact. Perhaps one highway is the profit highway. So it demands certain decisions made in business to deliver profits. Then you have the innovation highway. Can the two operate in parallel to drive fast flow? So the concept is, if you drive profits, you may do that at the expense of innovation, because innovation costs money. If you drive innovation, you may have to do that at the expense of profit. And if we use a traffic light as part of the analogy, yes, the flow is measured, the control is there, stop, go, stop, go. If you do one, if you improve the flow of profitability, you do it at the expense of innovation. Can we change the dynamic? Can we replace that stoplight with a managed Ethernet switch? Yes, it demands a higher set of criteria, and decision-making hierarchy, but ultimately it will allow both to flow faster, and that's really what we need to do. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the manufacturing that we have done at Questor and beyond, and I'm going to throw some concepts out to the audience in the hopes that maybe it will spark some idea. First of all, let's talk about manufacturing. What is it? Well, it's essentially a combination of labor and materials. In order to understand the manufacturing flow, you have to understand the interaction of these two things. So for example, if I'm producing something, I need to buy the materials. If I'm producing two things, I need to buy the materials for two things. If I engineer them smartly at the outset, perhaps I can use the same materials on both, and then I start to accumulate buying power. And with that buying power, I get my materials at less cost, and therefore I improve my margins. So perhaps in the production flow of things, total demand of inventory is a really key fundamental element. But as I said, manufacturing is a combination of labor and materials. So I can do a great job at the materials, at the procurement, and I have my supply chain lined up. I'm going to be challenged, perhaps, on labor. Am I building this piece at the cost, the labor cost, that I anticipated? Now, if I don't monitor the labor costs on a regular basis. I'll give you an example. At Quester Tangent many years ago, we basically said, okay, we're going to build in batches, and at the end of a batch, we'll determine what the cost was for labor. Now, these builds at Quester, we're an advanced manufacturer. We don't build lots of things. We build in relatively small quantities. So we're not talking about tens of thousands of units at a time. We may be talking about 500 units at a time. The manufacturing process may last a few months, maybe 6 months, a year, depending on the volume. If I'm building a batch that takes 3 months to build, and I'm only assessing the cost of labor at the end of that 3 months, I'm halfway through or a third of the way through my production, and I don't know if I'm meeting my labor targets. So that's where you have to integrate shop floor. So now you have a line on total demand for my materials, and I have very good feedback in a short order on what my labor costs are. And that's done through your enterprise resource system. And of course, that's technology. So you see, I want to give you the feel that there's innovation in technology, and we all look at the latest, greatest gadgets coming up, and we say, oh, isn't that great technology? But it is just as important that we innovate in business systems, again, to make sure that when we hit the traffic light, the flow continues very quickly. So when you integrate production, processing, and shop floor, now you seem to have a handle on it. Now, interestingly enough, there's another concept on top of that. And my colleague at Quester, Katie Singh, I don't see him here, but he's a fantastic architect at something called value stream mapping. And this is where you turn your old concepts of manufacturing on its head. So typically, when you picture manufacturing, you picture production lines. And products come in from inventory, they wet the production line, and they're continued to add value through process as you move through to the end. And you map the process. You know that kitting and that initial inspection and initial assembly, say, of a subcomponent is part of an operation. And a manufacturing process may give you 12 or 13 operations. When you're planning this, you have a sense, okay, kitting is going to cost me half an hour. And assembling the enclosures for a piece of electronics is going to cost me 20 minutes. So as you start to load up your process, you get a profile of what happens. Now, on a production line, things get wet on one end, they get added the value as they go through, and they're out the other side. And okay, we have a product, ladies and gentlemen. Yahoo! When it comes to trying to assess whether or not we're making money through that process flow, we look at it and we say, okay, fine. Now that we've got our ERP going, we can tell the labor right away. We have some pretty good feedback. So this operation is costing me the most money. So that's going to be the low-hanging fruit. If I want to improve what I'm doing, I'll go after that target. So you're looking to improve the flow, you're looking to improve the cost quotient as you move along by attacking the low-hanging fruit, i.e. the operation that costs you the most. Well, value stream mapping looks at it differently. It says, what operation is giving me the most value? I need to make sure I high grade that, and any operations in the flow that aren't adding value to my production flow, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's where you start to look. So for example, let's say I have 13 operations, and step 4 is an inspection step. I look at that, and if I look at the inspection step, say, and I track it over 3 or 4 months, let's say that inspection step is not delivering any non-conformances. You got to ask yourself the question, I spent 15 minutes doing that inspection, I've never found anything wrong at that stage in the production, it's providing me with no value, therefore I reduce it or eliminate it. Therefore, I'm high grading my production line. So value stream mapping combined with shop floor control and production order processing, understanding the materials costs, gives me a view of my production flow, when I integrate it into my ERP, and there's either house design or other application where a worker can stand open up an app and dictate, look, I clock in at this operation and I clock out at that one. So right away you get the feedback. So when you can move from, say, knowing how you're doing, how's my driving in my production, from 3 months, say, and a week to figure out the data, to about 4 or 5 hours. So that's the efficiency that you need to get. At Quester, we improved by 15, I'll say 20, but certainly 15% improvement in our margins through production because we implemented those tools. Now, those tools are business innovation. They're not necessarily technology innovation. However, the technology through ERP, has to be said, when you pull it all together, is very key to the process. Another thing on the production line. We had the pleasure of visiting China. Actually, over the last couple of years, we're doing much more business now with Chinese train builders moving into North America. It is a wonderful thing to watch how a huge labor force and numbers of workers beyond anything that we imagine. So we had the pleasure of visiting a Chinese factory that puts trains. They do 1,000 trains a year. As a matter of fact, when we were first bidding on a job in New York City, and we had the Chinese representative, I was saying, yeah, we're bidding on a job. It's total trains of 1,200. Isn't that fantastic? Right? Going to be 5 years worth of solid business. He looked at me and says, my factory produces that in about a year. Right? And I said, oh, give me a break. Why are you here anyway? What's the big deal if this is such a small part of let's say, a global supply for trains? Well, he said, North Americans understand the North American specification. You understand the European specification. We want to sell into Europe. We're using North America as our stepping stone. We need to learn from you. And I'll come back to that because, indeed, we have a very strong component in our advanced manufacturing sector that indeed the world can learn from, and I'll talk a bit about that. However, back to the production line. So, in this Chinese factory, there were no build books. There didn't seem to be anything on the production line that told the workers what to do. So, we assumed that, yep, they've been doing it so long, they understand the process, and they're putting the screws in, or they're taking the PCBAs off and mounting them, testing, that kind of thing. And indeed, they didn't operate with build books because they had rote knowledge, because there was 8,000 people in this factory, all doing the same job. Now, by putting build books electronically in front of the people that are building it, and not only that, many years ago, you'd spend hours drafting detailed drawings. Now, you snap a picture. A build book can be produced in 2 weeks for a piece of technology that's, say, worth, I don't know, $15,000 on the open market. It's a really good way to quickly use digital cameras. Okay, there you have technology improving business innovation. The key, though, is if we have this ERP system working, and we see one of the operations that's not meeting our targets, you call in engineering. You say, maybe we need a jig built for this particular component assembly. Okay, engineering goes back, designs the jig, puts it on the production line. Now I have a solid, I'm saving 5 minutes here, which is really important. If I don't have a build book, or if I have my build book in front of me, I have an opportunity to quickly feed back into that design process the ability to make that change on the production line. If, however, my production line is rote, change comes at a cost. It's very difficult to be agile. So agility is one of our advantages. Okay, let's just switch gears for a second. Wood. By the way, wood is the new steel, in case anybody hadn't read that. I'd like to talk very briefly about advanced manufacturing in the wood industry and the opportunity that exists. So we've been building with stick frame structures for many, many years. What happens when you try and marry wood engineering with technology? The Europeans did it, 1990s, early 1990s. They produced something called CLT, cross-laminated timber. Very interesting. We introduced it into the Canadian building market and the US building market in about 2010. It's simple, but it's interesting, and it is applying advanced manufacturing techniques to wood, basically. Okay, so CLT, you take a 2x6 or a 2x8, you edge saw it, you glue it, and if you need length, say 70 or say 50 meters or 40 meters long, you finger joint it before you edge band it, so you have this long panel of single ply. And then you take your 2x6s or your 2x8s and you build another panel, only the transverse, and you glue that on. And you build up plies of this cross-laminated timber up to 7 plies. By the way, 5 to 6 plies will get you the burn rating of steel. Now I have this big panel. What do? Well, I take out this honkin' great CNC machine. And it has big cutters on it, and it has a router that I would kill for in my shop. It's only about this big. And using CNC technology, the computer language from my CAD package, translated into G-code, sent to the CNC machine, now I have an ability to transform that panel into any shape, any size, any features that I want, from windows and doors to conduit to advanced joining structures. If you have an opportunity to go on Brock Commons, if you Google Brock Commons time-lapse on YouTube, you'll see a fantastic time-lapse series of the Brock Commons building that was built using CLT panels for shell, so floor and walls. It is outstanding. So 9 people could build a floor, 2 floors a week using wood panels. Now that's all exciting stuff, very interesting. But it's the advanced manufacturing process that allowed us to really deliver this building material. So it reminded me of the 737. Remember we heard the 737 was built all on computer using the various tools that are available before one piece of sheet metal was ever bent or one composite was ever put down. Well, CLT is exactly the same. It starts with a design. It's all designed and built. Now, I'm not just talking about the individual panels. I'm talking about the sequencing that the panels get loaded onto a flatbed if that's their method of transportation. I'm talking about the sequencing of these panels ending up on site, because when we're building, particularly in cities, the site is not that big. You have to stage things correctly. So you need those panels to come on site in exactly the orientation for which they will be built. That way you take up less space, less footprint. So now what we're talking about is an integrated approach to a building material, wood essentially, but now you're integrating it into your whole production flow. So you're using technology. Now the companies that exist, companies like Structurlam in Penticton, they don't see themselves as wood product manufacturers. They see themselves as building system engineers, because the buildings get engineered from a blank screen through to the application and the implementation and the building of the building. So when you talk about the intersection of technology and profitability, for those guys to deliver what they did, essentially, wood is relatively expensive as a building material. Although it's readily available, it's relatively expensive. However, when you add the total cost of getting materials on site, about significantly shorter times on site, a reduced workforce, so you're taking the workforce that might have spent hours on a job site, you're changing the dynamic of that workforce and you're putting them into a factory. So you're reducing your risk on site because you're shortening the time. When you add it all up, the total cost is not that different. If you're talking about units that are, say, I don't know, sort of 8 to 10 unit condo structures, now you're getting to the point where these building materials will compete with, say, stick frame construction. And as we progress, as these building materials become more and more in use, presumably we're going to see better cost efficiencies, and we're going to see wood being used quite effectively. So this is where technology innovation is important for a total building system, as opposed to just a single product. So innovation in technology is good, but innovation in business is equally important. Let's just talk briefly about a business plan. You know, how many business plans have we all written over the years? And you have to do it because your bank wants to see them, or your financing, or your shareholders, right? And it's, okay, it's a 20 to 30 page document. There's 1,500 of them on the internet, and you can download the outline, and Bob's your uncle, or Robert's your father's brother. What about if you turn that on its head? Techniques now for, it's called one-page plan. Now in Quester Tangent, we have a one-page plan, but you got to have a 10 by 10 plotter to get it out. Okay, we're cheating a bit. But the point is this. The business plan is not only now able to communicate, and should communicate, to the people that are supporting your business, it should be used to communicate to your staff, to your employees, to the people that bust their arse every day trying to add profit to the bottom line. So when you think about business plan, check out the one-page plan, because what it's able to do is not only provide, well, this is our 5-year plan, or this is our 10-year plan. And by the way, if you're German, you'll happily deal with a 20-year plan. The first time I saw this was back in the 90s, when we were struggling to find science funding in Canada, and we were operating on, at best, a 2-year plan, at worst a 1-year, because you didn't know if you're going to get funding from year to year to year. And you go into a meeting with the Germans, and they'll say, well, we have a 15-year plan, and this is year 7 of the 15. So we're able to focus on delivering that science to support our communities and our country. But we have to plan in 15-year lengths. So when we were struggling year on year to find funding, we thought, okay, the Germans have it right. Put in place a 15 or 20-year plan. And that's just what we did at Quester Tangent. And by the way, next year will be the 10th year of our 20-year plan. And we're pretty well on track to deliver that. So 10-year planning or 20-year planning can be done. Doesn't mean you're going to have all the answers 20 years out, but it means you have a plan. And what it also does, by the way, is keep you insulated from those, oh, I have another great idea. I think I can go in this direction. No, no, no. If it's not on the plan, it doesn't get done. And that's very, very important. The second thing that a big sort of one-page plan, and I would highly recommend it get produced, put on the lunchroom wall, because you need your staff to see exactly what you see every day. That way, everybody is working in lockstep. That's going to help deliver you profit. Now, I mentioned earlier, working with representatives from the China Rail Rolling Stock Corporation has been very interesting for us. But it also provided some insight into advanced manufacturing. Okay. What is advanced manufacturing? I heard it bandied about at the US presidential election, those on high. We're going to do advanced manufacturing. And I thought, what is that? Because there's plenty of manufacturers that we've been manufacturing things for many, many years. I don't understand what this advanced manufacturing is. So you ask around, and you get a sense that advanced manufacturing is akin to Lucille Ball, right, on a production, when all of a sudden the conveyor belt, she's making cupcakes and she's supposed to put icing on it, all of a sudden the conveyor belt whips up faster, and next thing you know, it all falls apart dramatically. So advanced manufacturing must be related to equipment and technology. Well, if you look at what Industry 4.0 tells us, if Industry 1.0 was the invention of steam and mechanical advantage, And Industry 2.0 was mass production with electricity. And let's say Industry 3.0 is the microprocessor. Industry 4.0 is using the information such as that I mentioned earlier on my enterprise resource program, using that information over time to feed back, using the data to feed back. And this is really important because in working with the Chinese, we're able to get a glimpse of how production gets managed. Now, we have an advantage in Canada, in the US, in North America. We have to take advantage of that. So this is my look at advanced manufacturing. What may take, and not necessarily in the Chinese particularly, but let's call it low-cost country manufacturing, where you can produce tens of thousands of widgets in a very highly efficient manner. We may not want to produce them. We may not have the capacity, we may not be structured to deliver those kinds of high volume production. But what we have is an ability to generate a single value through manufacturing very smartly. So let's say I have unit 5 or unit 3, or in fact, let's say unit -2. So unit -2 is where I'm figuring out the engineering. Unit 0 or unit 1 will be the first article inspection. If we organize ourselves correctly, and we have the minds and the dedicated educational mindset to deliver material science and engineering design and design for manufacturability, we have an ability in North America to deliver in unit 5 off the production line what a low-cost country manufacturer may take 10,000 or 500. So that is really key because we get to the quality much faster. Therefore, we can deliver profits much faster, and we can turn on a dime because we're way more agile. So to me, advanced manufacturing is providing the ability that you can get to unit number 5 in the same time and with the same quality that it may take unit 1,000 from a low-cost country manufacturer. And we need to take advantage of that, and that should influence from start to finish what we do in our educational system and through our entrepreneurship programs and through our apprentice programs. We need to deliver those kinds of thoughts and those kinds of workers to be able to deliver that. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll just leave you with a comment that we have an opportunity to do this properly. We have an opportunity to take on the world in advanced manufacturing, and we should not lose that opportunity. So thank you very much.
I've heard elements of that speech over time, and I could just listen to it forever and for hours. So sorry we have to put a time limit on your extraordinary experience and viewpoints. One thing I forgot in the scope of managing all of this is we didn't get any chocolates for the speakers or anything like that. So I hope there's free coffee in the back. Okay. So I'd like to introduce our panelists and a little bit like, let's say, an award show where you're introducing the nominations. I haven't entirely worked through how I'm going to do this, so how about if all of you just come and sit at the front here, Lynn, Sandra, and Steve, and I'll introduce you quickly. These folks will say a word or two about who they are and what they do, and then we'll bring Bill back, because they're going to engage with Bill. We're going to do this for as long as we can, and we'll probably eat into our coffee break a little bit, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think these work. One just test. Yeah, good. Yep. My far right is Steve Bonham. Steve is the Director of Manufacturing at Redland Technologies and moved to the island from Ontario in 2014. Prior to assuming his role at Redland, he has held numerous roles in operations management, growing and leading teams in engineering, supply chain planning, and manufacturing. Sitting beside him in the middle is Lynn Brown, HR business partner, GSC Western Canada for Schneider Electric. For the past 14 years, Lynn has been leading and developing teams at Schneider Electric. Initially, Lynn was in the commercial side of the business, managing a technical inside sales team. I don't know how you did that, managing salespeople, being a salesperson myself, don't know how that's done. Then moved into operations, managing the customer service and logistics team for the Victoria plant. Today, Lynn is a regional HR business partner with HR responsibilities for the Victoria and Edmonton manufacturing plants. And to my immediate right is Sandra Amador. Sandra is a Director of Continuous Improvement at VMAC, which stands for Vehicle Mounted Air Compressors out of Nanaimo. Sandra is a quality and continuous improvement professional with over 25 years of industry-based experience. Sandra is also a chemical engineer that has made a career within the quality and continuous improvement fields, utilizing her training in operations management, and as a certified quality auditor, constantly learning about the interactions of processes and people. I think I've prepared this set of activity as best I can, but I'm not entirely sure how it's going to come off. So comments about the speaker, you can go immediately into questions to the speaker. It's sort of your call. So how about if we start with you, Steve?
Sure. It's great to meet all of you. I'm sure we'll have a chance to network later on. I'm really excited to be here. One of the best moves I made was to come out here 3 years ago. And after about 25 years in operations at various companies, including the Royal Canadian Mint, I was head of supply chain there for a couple years. It gave me exposure to a lot of different types of production. And I think that was one of the keys for me in gelling what is really important in terms of manufacturing, in terms of throughput, in terms of profitability. And Bill touched on some great points in terms of the intersection of technology and profitability. And I'll get into that with my questions and my comments a little later. But I'm very happy to be here. Redland, for your knowledge, we are crystal growers. We grow crystal. So we grow a metal, what's called a boule, of cadmium, zinc, and tellurium. And it's a cylinder about 140 millimeters tall and 72 millimeters in diameter. We then cut it up into wafers and cut those wafers into tiles, metallize both sides of the tiles, and create a semiconductor detector. So we detect radiation. And these radiation detectors are put in medical and security applications, so dirty bomb detection, baggage scanning, and nuclear medicine applications, so next generation CAT scans, for example. So it's a pretty cool technology. They've worked on it for 17 years. I was brought in to scale up the manufacturing of it because that's, in my background, that's what I've done. I've done optoelectronic devices, telecom, et cetera. So it's a real variety, but I've never grown a crystal and scaled that up. So it's a new experience. So I'd be happy to talk in more detail with you individually about Redland. We're challenged right now in terms of attracting people, in terms of attracting skills. There's not a lot of knowledge about growing crystals out there. So as you can imagine, if we're scaling up and putting production technicians on the floor, how do we train them? What skills are we looking for? What do we need to focus on? And that's what I'm here to both learn about and share today. So I'm really happy to be here. And thanks, Bill. You touched on a lot of good points in your opening speech. Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to continue with some introductions. So I'm happy to be here as well with Schneider Electric. So for anyone who is not familiar with Schneider, we manufacture digital energy meters, and we've got an operation over on Keating Crossroad. We've got about 55 within our manufacturing department. We cater primarily to the commercial industrial sector. So pretty much everyone here probably has a digital energy meter on the side of your house. We are not in that space. That is the residential space. Those meters are probably retailing for about $50. Our meters are highly accurate. They've got onboard logging. You'll see them retailing for upwards of $10,000, $11,000. We sell them all over the world. The meters that we manufacture at our plant in Victoria, we are the only site in the world that manufactures those product lines. We are an advanced manufacturer. We're trying to be innovative. We are trying to leverage the business innovation, the technological innovation, and we need to have talent that can support all the changes that go along with that. So, you know, some of the gaps that we're seeing, I'll be talking a little bit more about in a minute, but definitely soft skills is an area, change management, people being able to be agile and support all the innovation that we are trying to lead within our sector is really important. So we'll talk more about that.
Hello. I am also very happy to be here. I am not going to give you a large description of what I do, but I do know that when I first got in contact with VMAC, I had no idea that we had that kind of manufacturing in the island. When you go out and you talk to people, you see that most people think that the Vancouver Island region is a retirement community. So manufacturing is not really popular as far as a description of Vancouver Island. So I've been in manufacturing all my life. It's something that is very close to my heart. And the problems that are being pointed out just now are, I think, the same for all of us. Location, and then the innovation skills. When we have very specific industries, it's very hard to actually find people prepared for it unless you are actually poaching from your competitors. So a lot of innovation and the training that is required is one of the main issues that I see here.
So if I can ask a question, maybe, John? Mm-hmm. So, okay, so we're all manufacturers. Can you, each of you, give me the single biggest challenge that you face as manufacturers on the island?
Finding people with the skills, both technical and soft, that will fit your organization.
So as a follow-up, do you think on balance you need more specialized, like should Camosun or should UVic or the other technical colleges on the island, should they be directing students towards specific programs that are more specialized, or does it really matter because you have to train them anyway in what they're doing?
Because of all our industries are very specific, you still have to train them on what you do. The basics of it will be great, but what we are also seeing is that a lot of companies are actually hiring for fit more so than for skills, because the skills could be taught. But when you are developing a culture where you are getting people that could be a detriment for what you've worked for, it is more important to actually have soft skills. And that's a big part of what we at VMAC work towards.
What about at Schneider?
So I would agree with Sandra. So as far as soft skills go and attracting talent and hiring for fit so that we can leverage our internal process training, we're looking for the emotional intelligence, we're looking for the interpersonal communication skills. A new one that we've been really encouraging throughout the company globally is diversity and inclusion training. So there is a generational workforce in manufacturing, and we need to make sure that those employees understand one another and working well together. So having that appreciation and inclusion is important. And then the change management, which I mentioned earlier. So being able to be agile, you're not going to be agile if your workforce is not open to the change. So you can bring someone in who has a good fit, but if you're not able to have them support the change, you're not going to be agile. So I'd like to see more of that soft skills learning done in the post-secondary institutions before they come in for their interviews.
Yeah, I heard one time a couple of years ago that arts is the new physics when it comes to technology, because communication skills are extremely valuable, and sometimes they will trump a very experienced background, say in technology or a very specific engineering disciplines. What about at Redland?
I echo the comments that Sandra and Lynn have made. I think it's absolutely key that we have people that are able to learn and able to have an open mind about the processes that they're going to learn, because as they've said, we have our own training plan. We don't expect people to know how to grow crystal and how to fabricate detectors, but what we do need is people who are open to learn and open to understanding work instructions and using data to drive decisions. Many times we have people coming in and they have preconceived notions, and they have a hard time giving up those notions. So I agree. The arts, it tends to have, and I'm an engineer, mechanical engineer by training, engineering taught you right and wrong and a black and white solution. Sometimes there are no black and white solutions. Sometimes it's a little gray, and you have to be open to understand how to work in that kind of environment. And I think the arts have a little bit better background, a little bit more open mind from that context. But yes, definitely agile. We have to be agile. We have to be flexible. But it's interesting that 3 different businesses are echoing the same thing. Soft skills are very important. The ability to relate in a team, the ability to take direction and to voice opinion and raise your hand if you have any questions. That's key for us.
Yeah, one of the things that we learned in the business planning process was culture. We talk about the culture of industry, and it's a word that's widely used, but how do you reduce it to practice, this cultural integration, right? So what we did was we stated categorically up front on the business plan, these are the values that we're looking for. And so it's sometimes culture can be a sort of a sensitive issue for people, and I'm not talking about race, creed, or religion, that kind of thing. I'm talking about an integration into a business system or adoption of a process, for example. So are you engaged? Are you accountable? Those kinds of things. Are you willing to be a leader even though you're not in a leadership role? Mm-hmm. So if you articulate those up front and you measure against them in performance reviews, we find that very, with an open conversation, it desensitizes it because everybody has the same conversation. So that's one technique that we use to try and, you can go through a lengthy interview process. Beggars can't be choosers on this island, right? We're a dead end in terms of people come to the island to live on the island. They don't typically pass through. So you need to do whatever you can, right, to get those kinds of good people.
And we're finding a tightening in the labor market, getting good people. We've grown to about 130 people now, and we're finding that even through the agencies, through networking, it's very hard to find people. So obviously, building relationships with the UVic and Camosun is a very key part of our growth strategy because we need the enthusiastic young grads to be able to come in and do great things, but it's hard to find people. The other thing I'd like to mention is patience. The people that come in need patience. They can't be a manager the first year out. They can't be a senior engineer when they don't have any experience. So they need patience, they need to learn. And yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good question. No, I know, but that's what I get asked. Well, why can't I be in a team lead after a year? Well, you need to learn. You need to learn various aspects of the business, and I think people tend to be impatient when they first join. So.
That is true, I will agree, but at the same time, that communication portion is what plays into the role there. Any culture that you want to change has to start with management. I belong to an association, the American Society of Quality, and we have about 400 members or so in BC. And a lot of the complaints or comments that we hear constantly are, how come I cannot do this or implement this tool or this new program? My manager doesn't want it. My manager is not agreeing with it. I tried something and it's not supported, therefore it dies, right? So when you're talking about culture, when you're talking about, you have to wait and the communication is important. How do you provide that communication? It has a lot to do with management and how much are you willing to really lead by example.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for emceeing. I've had occasion, the odd time they've let me in to speak to graduate students and master's degree students, and I've been asked, well, what would be the one defining skill set that a business person should need or require? And I go, well, they really need to know how to communicate. And I'll say that, and all these kids are looking at me like, it can't be that easy. We've just spent about 50 grand, and 4 years learning stuff. I go, well, do you know how to communicate? It's fascinating how they don't get that, and it's still so very important. Okay, we're going to take questions from the audience. We're at 10 o'clock. I'm going to suspect that we're going to go about 15 minutes here. So any questions? Test, test, test. You have a question? Okay, this guy put his hand up first. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying, and my sort of first question is, are our educational institutions, whether they be technical or colleges or universities within the local area, providing the kinds of soft skill sets that you need? And when you're doing your hiring, are you having to hire from outside because they either A, are not providing that, or not providing it in enough quantity for you?
I can speak firsthand about the interactions with UVic. We have co-op students, both test and process engineering co-op students, and we find that in general, their communication skills are good, their soft skills are good, and we haven't had issues with that. So I find in general so far that we've had really good success with our students from UVic. So not sure if it's just happenstance or if it's actually programmed through the teaching that the communication is there, but we are getting good communication from and good soft skills from UVic.
So one of the ways that we've been filling positions is promoting from within. It's effectively zero unemployment right now. So to fill some of the key roles that we have, we're having trouble finding people locally. So we're promoting from within. And what we're finding is that in order to support those soft skills, we're needing to bring in external facilitators or doing our own facilitations. Now, some of the technical roles we are filling from outside of Victoria, and that traditionally has been a key way to fill. Are they coming in with decent soft skills? There's something to be desired, I think. I've seen overall, it's an area that it's hard to really, you can teach it, you can read textbooks, but you need the experience to really get it. So I don't want to say that perhaps UVic and Camosun aren't doing a good job, but when you're bringing fresh grads in, you need to be able to put the textbook to practice. And that's where once they've got some experience and then we do some external facilitation or internal team building workshops, that's where we're able to get the soft skills into practice and then it clicks.
I have seen some of the VIU curriculums, and I haven't really found anything specific that will help to improve the soft skills. And the other part to it is, even if you get, a lot of the young generations are actually really good at communicating, and they have a load of information that they can have access to at any point, right? That's not the problem. But then they are interacting with people that maybe in your own company do not have those communication skills pre-existing.
I would like to put a plug in for English being taught. The communication skills, so not necessarily English language, but communication skills. We pack our students, technology-wise, so heavily in their final couple of years with technology that we do it at the expense of perhaps some basic communication skills. So if I had my druthers, I would like to see a little more of that in the later stages of a student's life, because ultimately that ability to communicate will serve them much better in the long run.
Okay, so I moved to the island about 18 months ago from Calgary, and what's really interesting is just the number of fantastic companies that we have here, and yet somehow our story is not told. People aren't aware. So, you know, you don't have to look around here. I mean, this is a beautiful island. You'd think people would die to live here, and we know all the challenges that are going on in Vancouver, and yet somehow we're not able to attract the talent out of a higher cost place like Vancouver and give them much more of an affordable lifestyle and still give them great jobs here. And so I'd be really intrigued, and this is quite a high-level conversation or question, about what do you think we need to do as an island to really be able to remarket ourselves so we're not seen as the retirement home. We do have these technologies. We have Schneider, we have up in Nanaimo, we have in Nupton, a robotics company. In Qualicum Beach, we have Cloudhead Games, which is a leading virtual reality company. So we have these companies here, but somehow our story's not being told, which obviously we could tell the story, it helps with recruitment. So very philosophical, big picture question, but I'd love to get your thoughts on how we as an island can actually come together and position ourselves differently.
Can I jump in?
Go ahead.
Affordable housing, I think, is pretty key. So, you know, yes, we're cheaper than Vancouver, some parts of Vancouver, but someone who's fresh out of university, trying to find a place to live, raise a family on Lower Vancouver Island anyway, which is where I'm more familiar with, it's just not affordable. So that is, when we are looking at talent from outside of Victoria that are not familiar with Victoria, we make sure they're really understanding and considering the real estate market and the cost of housing here before we go too far down the path of the recruiting. So affordable housing.
There was a chemistry consulting actually did a survey last August. I don't know if you are familiar with the results, but over 67%, I believe, came out. There were about 250 businesses that were surveyed and 10 different kinds of industries, small from large companies, and the most popular response was basically housing. Housing is an issue. And whether it's lack of affordable housing or even the restriction on when they have suites for rent but they are not legal, or the landlords raise the fees and so on and so forth. So that's a big problem.
Yeah, I fully agree. In fact, I'm not even in the housing market yet. I'm still renting, and I'm trying to find the right entry point. But housing is definitely an issue at all levels. But from a visibility perspective, we've joined up with Viatech. Viatech is a very active technology consortium and association, and Dan Gunn's done a phenomenal job of raising the visibility of technology in Victoria. I think that's really helpful, and it's really helpful across Canada and even into the U.S. That we toured a bunch of people through Redland through Viatech, and one of the guys was from California, from Silicon Valley, and he was very impressed with the caliber of the companies that he saw here. So word is getting out. Is it getting out fast enough? Maybe not, but I think we just need to continue to shout from the rooftops that we have a very viable manufacturing and technology centric city. But housing, how do we get around housing? I'd like to hear some great ideas on that one.
I have one.
Okay.
This is a little contrarian, but don't throw the whole question of affordable housing at municipal governments or provincial governments and expect that they're going to make a difference. I think if we're going to put money and effort anywhere, it's to improve our ability to manufacture goods at global cost competitive prices. We make more margin, we can pay people more. We pay people more, they have access to compete in a marketplace with other sectors. Because half the problem is we can't compete with the financial sector, right? We can't pay our people well enough. So to me, you attack the problem a little bit differently. Make more money so that you can pay people more, and please dispel the myth that, oh, because you own a business, most of the money ends up in your pockets. I can testify before a grand jury that is not the case.
So we've got one more question back here, and possibly time for another one, but yeah.
Good morning. My name is Rob Janis. I'm with the Victoria Foundation, and I wanted to thank you all for your comments. In particular, I'm the Director of Communications, so thank you for stroking my ego this morning. The Victoria Foundation is also the region's largest non-government funder, so we're very interested in all the issues that are being brought up this morning in terms of education, in terms of housing and all that, and I'm learning a lot today. But my question actually goes back to the original presentation with Bill. The notion of a 10, 15, 20-year plan seems at odds intuitively with the idea of being nimble in the face of technology. And I wondered if you could sort of speak to that and how those two things, which seem somewhat at polar ends, work for you and for others that are following this plan.
Yeah, sure can. So if you look 20 years out, you're not going to dictate day-to-day, month-to-month, or perhaps even year-to-year planning at a 20-year level. You're saying, I want to be here. I want to be For example, at Quester, our original thought for the 20-year plan was for 20 years, we would be a significant portion of the rail electronics business in Europe. That was the plan. That didn't say necessarily that when we're there, this is how it would be orchestrated, or this is where we would have our manufacturing facilities. It just said, we want to be there. So in order to make that happen, you back it off by 5 years. Year number 5, so 1 to 5, is, okay, we are going to be the gorilla in the marketplace in North America. In order to do that, we need to be 45% of electronics on trains in North America. And so you organize your 5-year plan so that at the end of the 5th year, and by the way, by the time you're into year 3, your plan better be working, because if it isn't, you'll know, in our business anyway. So if you plan in 5-year chunks and you back it off by 5 years, you don't have to answer every detail in 20 years, but you have to know, this is where I want to be. Now, let's say things change, and let's say Africa is the hub of rail transport in the year 2028. By at least targeting Europe, you're making all the right steps. If it ultimately isn't Europe, if it's Asia or Africa, then okay, but you've laid the groundwork correctly. So I guess the specific answer to your question is, you can get there. The steps you need to take on a yearly basis or a monthly basis keep you agile. The steps you take on a 5-year cycle basis keep you well financed for those 5 years. And then ultimately set your goals higher at a higher level and plan that way.
That was directed at Bill. So we'll go to this question, and then that'll be our final question.
Great. Yeah. So my name is Hong Yu. For I guess the audience who doesn't know, I'm with National Research Council IRAP program, and my question is more for our manufacturers. I think you all touched very good points. We need skills. We need skills from our educational system, new injections into company, as well as internal growing the skills as well. And as a touch point, I think government of Canada recently really trying to encourage specific skills, looking at the global level is. Canada, we are still, it's a huge country, sparsely populated if you look at the entire country. So there are certain skills, if you identify that is required for the growth, critical growth of your company, that you identify the skills that needs to bring into the country, all over the global market. And certainly there are programs that's available will fast track this process. So if you haven't heard, want to know more, I'm right here, grab my name card, and we can talk about it.
Was there a question in there? Okay, well, let's put it to you. I think the question might have been, okay, let's go into the slipstream of that. That being, can you identify outside of the soft skills some of the harder skills that are required, that are missing, that are gaps? And in some instances, are those skills that can only be obtained from folks not living in Canada? So it's kind of a two-barrel. I think that might have been something. Okay.
We actually are finding out that finding people with trades, so welders or fabricators or anything like that with Red Seal certifications is being really hard. Our HR manager has been posting and has been getting very little in terms of resumes submitted. So that's one area. And the conversation went around maybe, moving people to Alberta now that they're coming back and doing more business. It is one of the big drains that we have. So that has been quite an impact on our different availability for trades. But the other point, Bill brought value streams, and we at DMAC are trying very hard to go through our lean transformation. A lot of those skills and even training available through universities, not just here in the island, but even Vancouver, we don't get specific school or courses for that. And many times those tools, if you teach them locally and you do your own internal training, it's effective, but people do not come prepared with any kind of tools like that.
Yeah, I would agree with the lean training, lean manufacturing knowledge, and I think really in order to get the right skill set when it comes to lean manufacturing is you're going to want to get someone who has worked in a manufacturing company that is more mature with lean. That's where you're really getting the expertise. So someone can be trained and have all the theory, but we need the hands-on. So Victoria, the manufacturing industry in Victoria is not overly mature with respect to lean, so we are having to look outside, outside of Victoria and sometimes outside of the country. So, and even off the continent. So.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a quick comment. It's not so much a skill that we're looking for, but it's a work ethic. It's the ability to come in and do the job that you're asked to do and do it day in and day out for the benefit of the company. And we had one great example recently. We had a individual that we found through the Intercultural Association, and he's from Iran. He's his bachelor in chemical engineering. He didn't take an engineering position. We didn't have a spot for him, but he took a production technician role, and he worked for a year and a half in a production technician role, learning how to lap down our tiles, which is a very specific operation. This individual had such a unique skill set. When we came across a new role for profiling furnaces, and furnaces are the heart of our operation, growing the crystal. He had just the right combination of skills to be able to do that role, and now it's a pivotal role. So we moved him into that job. He had the patience to be there for a year and a half lapping down tiles, but he found a sweet role for him, and it's specific for the company, and it's one of our key roles. So we're looking for work ethic and the application of the skills that people have. So it's hard to gauge in an interview is what's your work ethic like? It's very hard to feel that out. So anyway, just another comment.
And I have a request from the boffins that dictate student intake. I would love to see more software, not necessarily software engineer, computer scientist, but I'd like to see not a coder. I mean, we're focusing downward right now, more coding skill sets. I want to see a skill set that has knowledge of the code, obviously, and how it all puts together. But I want to see people that look the other way, how systems interact. We talk about big data. Big data is here, and it demands a mindset that's a big picture thinker. So systems architecture, putting machines together with the human interface. Those are the kinds of skill sets that we lack, and I think we all have the ability to deliver. So from the ground up, looking at the big picture as opposed to focusing downward onto a line of code.
I'm wanting to say a few words about the sponsors before each speaker. Camosun College Innovates, the team that includes Heather and Cheryl and Jamie and Tim, all of the facilities people, all of the tech people. They've been extraordinary. Anyone coming to me saying what a great event we're having so far, I say it's because of Camosun College. So they've been a help from day one and a supporter of what is all going on here. Thank you to all of you. You've been amazing. Tim and I go back a ways. Tim is the BC Regional Innovation Chair in Sport Technology, Director of Sport Innovation Center, and the Director of Camosun Innovates at Camosun College. He's been very active in the Canadian research and technology community for more than 30 years, and him and I go back that far. And parallel activity in yet again managing and trying to converge these entities of education and industry and trying to help make them both work as best they can. Tim is the leading Edge Endowment Fund BC Regional Innovation Chair in Sport Technology at Camosun. He was responsible for the establishment of the Sport Innovation Center in partnership with Canadian Sport Institute Pacific at Pisces down the road. Tim is also the Director of Camosun Innovates, facilitating the expansion of applied research capacity at the college. His title today is the response of post-secondary education to the disruptive technology push-pull. We have a PowerPoint. He's a good friend of mine, and I'm so excited to introduce him to talk to you this morning. Where did he go?
As is often the case, I'm going to abandon my presentation. You can have the PowerPoint and look at it, and I'll skip through some of the slides. But I was so inspired by what I heard this morning that I'm going to change my focus a little bit. A little bit of convergence, though. The Redland guy. Bob Redden and Brian Lent and I were the founding board of Redland way back, those 20 years ago. And now I'm dating myself for how long I've been in Victoria. And some of those first zone heating furnaces were actually designed, built by a Camosun faculty member. So there is a convergence. There is some really cool things that happen. One of the questions that was posed to the panel this morning was, in my words, is post-secondary doing it right? My short answer is no. And what I'm going to talk about and why I took a stick of dynamite to my presentation is to address that no. And it's at the back of my presentation. So if you just bear with me quickly, I'm going to run through a few slides, but there's nothing new here for you. You've seen it all. I'm talking about disruptive technologies and what this disruption means to Canadian companies. And what it means to island companies. But most importantly, what I want to talk about this morning is what does it mean to post-secondary, and specifically what does it mean for the colleges. There is a tremendous opportunity here in Canada to change the landscape of what we do at this nexus between industry and post-secondary. Tremendous opportunity, unprecedented opportunity, and I don't use those words carelessly. But it means that we have to open the dialogue between groups like this and that campus and UVic and any other, and there's no finger pointing here. But the system has changed. The process has changed, and yet the core of what we do as educators has not changed. And that's the disruption that we need to address. And that disruption is not going to get us to the end game of what you all talked about this morning. And man, I'm glad it's taped, because I'm taking that panel discussion and that great presentation by Bill Collins and I'm running it right to the president's office. Because that's the language we speak in Camosun Innovate. And we work at that intersection between industry and our capacity as applied researchers. But it's not the message, and I'm sorry to say it, and if there's other people from Camosun here, suck it up. It's not how we always operate. You talk so clearly about the soft skills. You talk so clearly about the need for interdisciplinary interaction. You talk so clearly and passionately about what this means to your companies in terms of the skills. Post-secondary still doesn't teach that way. I'm happy to say that there is a push, and that's why the title says push and pull. So the pull is what you all said this morning. And we know, given John's experience in traveling around the province, what those manufacturing companies talk about. And John has brought back again very clearly this message about soft skills, this message about the gap that you companies have in accelerating what you need to do to continue your growth. So how do we ensure that those seeds that you're planting have a fertile ground in post-secondary? How do we ensure that disruptions that are facing your companies on a daily basis get inoculated in to our programming? I like Bill's discussion around a 20-year timeline. I think post-secondary's timeline stopped about 15 years ago. Sorry. Nancy, I'm sorry. We need to change the way we deliver education. So the happy answer to this is there is a push for change within post-secondary. There is a push to bring, whatever you want to call it, work-integrated learning, experiential learning, applied learning to the forefront. But what does that mean? What does that mean for us? Well, it means for us, we also have to be nimble. You all talk about being nimble. We also, as education side of this system, have to be nimble. We can't say, we've always done it this way. Because none of you are doing it the same way you've always done it. Technical skills are one thing, but interdisciplinary skills, the soft skills, the team building, the interaction, is we're going to move the yardsticks forward. Now here at Camosun, we've had an interesting, I'll say 10 years. Camosun was part of a national program to build what was called applied research capacity at Canadian colleges. And this was a direct reflection for Canada's lack of performance on the innovation front. Most of you in industry will know exactly what I'm talking about, but just a refresher. Canada usually ranks near the top of the world in per capita basic research funding. The bulk of that money, and on an annual basis, more than $3 billion goes into basic research in Canada. Very impressive, essential. I'm not arguing against that. And yet when it comes time to those innovation measures, I call those translation measures, the productivity, Canada's barely hanging on to the top 25. What's that? Why does that where's that gap come from? In part, you addressed it. It's those skills. It's making sure that we put those skills at the right time and the right place. And to me, it's not a bad thing that we're sitting here in a trades building. For the most part, people think of trades as low-tech. But as a country, if we don't have a vigorous continuum between the people who can put into practice and implement and build, and the people that design and build those concepts, we've got a gap. And in part, that's the gap we've created ourselves as a country. So what Canada said was, how do we increase our innovation capacity? They looked across the spectrum and said, yeah, we got these great universities, world-class universities. Yet we've also got how many colleges across the country with an amazing capacity, faculty, students, equipment, that can help fill the gap between the lab and the marketplace. And so Canada, about 8 years ago, embarked on a program to invest in capacity at Canadian colleges, to unleash the potential of innovation. And I can say in those relatively short time frames that have been established, that amazing successes have been had by the colleges. Not $1 flows to a Canadian college for a project unless they have an industry partner. There's no discovery work going on. We're taking the work that gets done and we're implementing it. But more importantly, those projects are used to train the students in exactly the skill sets you're talking about. So it's not just technical solutions that are being implemented. Yes, most of them have the roots as a technical challenge that's posed to the college. But the successful delivery of a solution is not just a new piece of technology. It's not just a 3D printed part. It's actually telling that team of students the impact of their design changes on the cost of production. It's actually telling those students that are writing the code that they can't take 8 months to write a line of code. They got to turn that around quickly, because if they don't, the market's gone. It's embedding those implementation practices through all parts of our curriculum. That's the experiential learning. That's hoping to accelerate the adaptation and adoption of those skills you all talked about this morning. Those so-called soft skills, We know there's a gap. We know as a country there's a gap. Part of the solution is to retool what post-secondary delivers. So with your forbearance, I will skip through some of the really good slides and images I had at the start. We talked about robotics, artificial intelligence. None of these are new. The networks, advanced manufacturing, collaborative connected platforms. So how do we respond to this as this collective community? And again, those slides are available. You can all take a look at them at your own time. I want to focus on our response. So we talked a bit about the culture. It was interesting to hear how many of the people from industry this morning talked about the culture they're trying to create and sustain within their companies. Well, we have a parallel process going on in post-secondary where we're trying to create a culture of this innovation. We're trying to create a culture that encourages breaking down the silos between the disciplines. We're trying to create a culture that recognizes there's great power in listening to our industry partners and those community stakeholders who actually hire our grads. They have a stake in the quality of their programming and the type of programming that we deliver. So that culture is a huge awareness step that I can happily say Camosun is taking a large step towards solving. Agility, right? We talked about agility. I don't think, for the most part, and I've worked at this interface for my entire career between post-secondary and industry. I don't think, for the most part, industry views post-secondary institutions as agile. We're a big ship. We have a marine tech program here. We're a big ship. And if you've been on a cruise ship or a tanker, you know that they're not easy to turn on a dime. But that's the legacy. That's what we got to put behind us. We have to create processes that are responsive and are agile to the needs of our ultimate stakeholders, which is the people that hire our students. There's great power in that, great power. And of course, none of this happens without resources. You need the grease on the skids to actually make these things work. So, here's some of the response we need to foster within this country. We need to create these institutions that are nimble and cross-curricular. Remove those barriers. Why not have trade students working side by side with our tech students, working side by side with our business students? Why not? When they get out and work, that's how they work. We don't teach them that way. Right? So I think it's actually great that we're sitting here in a trades facility. It would actually be even greater if our trades faculty could have heard what you said this morning.
It's all taped.
It's all taped. So that's point number one. Cross-curricular, interdisciplinary, whatever word you want to use. Break down those silos on our campuses. And also, between campuses. These are not solitudes. Right? F the ivory tower. Right? These are not solitudes. I can give you many, many examples of the translation step between research that happens at universities. Always essential. But they're never going to get it to the end game of what a lot of the things you're looking for. That's what colleges do. Sweet spot for colleges, putting into practice. Implementation. Hands-on learning, experiential learning. That's us. I said sustainable links to the outside world. That's almost the wrong statement. You're not the outside world. You need to be integrated in on a daily basis with what we do seamlessly. Seamlessly. Not meet twice a year and give advice. the successful projects that we deliver under the Camosun Innovates umbrella, and indeed happens at many, many other colleges across the country, require seamless integration with industry partners. Partners. We're not just delivering coffee table reading at the end of the project. We're delivering results. And you know what my ultimate success measure is? It's not patents. And as a sidebar, we don't own any technology. So the college in these projects, it takes no ownership. Company owns all the IP. Free and clear. It's not dollars. It's not number of projects. It's, are you hiring our students? And are our students able to enter your workforces as quickly and productively as possible? And the only way we're going to collectively get there is if we listen carefully to you. You need to help us solve some of the challenges we face. How do we develop curriculum? That probably needs to change, not on 15-year cycles, but on 6-month cycles. Well, from an academic perspective, that's impossible. And yet you're faced with that challenge all the time. So how do we work together to create this seamless boundary? How do we work together to ensure that that feedback loop between your needs and what we deliver is done on a consistent and high quality basis? We don't have all the answers. But I think part of the answer is this dialogue. Part of the answer is always engaging, ensuring that there's listening. And you talked about the communication skills. Well, not only do we need to teach our students the communication skills that this fellow was so happy that we highlighted, but we need to encourage that communication between you as industry, as the stakeholders, and the college. This does not happen in isolation. This does not happen in a silo. This does not happen with a wall. This does not happen in an ivory tower. It's an ongoing, productive partnership to deliver the quality that you need. We know that these disruptive forces are changing the way we have to deliver education. Access to the information, that great fire hose of the internet, is huge. The talking head at the front of the room is not the ultimate delivery of knowledge anymore, because these students have grown up with this. They can challenge us every second of a lecture. Every second. Is this world class? Is this the best? Is this the latest? And if it's not, then we're not doing our job. But that changes the dynamic, and you can understand putting that challenge in front of a faculty member and say, our expectation is you're going to be current in your classroom. How would you guys respond to that challenge in your particular field? You're teaching mechanical engineering, and your challenge is you have to be current in the classroom now. I taught a course a few years ago in sport technology. It sounds kind of frivolous, but actually sport is a cool analogy, because in sport, they adopt new materials very, very quickly. And so when I first walked into the classroom, I looked around, and the students, this is my last story, I promise. The students, a lot of them were on their phones, on their computers, and I'm going, how am I going to deal with this? And instead of shutting it down, I said, okay. I said, here's the challenge. I said, when I present a topic, I want you to challenge me. I want you to use your devices, use your access to data to challenge me on my currency. And so it became a competition. And every lecture was a feedback with the students. What about this? Hey, you forgot, you didn't put that thing. And so we created this dialogue. So my currency was driven by their currency, by their urgency, by their thirst. Our collective urgency needs to be clearly identified. You have to say your urgency clearly, like you did this morning. That message needs to be delivered to the top of the institutions, to the bottom of the institutions, all at the same time. That sense of urgency that you all face to meet your weekly, your quarterly, your yearly, your 20-year goals, that sense of urgency needs to be put right into the center of the post-secondary system. There is capacity to respond. There's amazing passion with our faculty and our students. But we need to find some ways collectively to unleash that. Hopefully, part of what you'll see as you walk down the hill on our tight schedule is one of the mechanisms by which we see this unleashing become possible. But it's not going to happen unless you're going to invest. And I'm not just talking about dollars, I'm talking about time, I'm talking about ideas, I'm talking about dialogue, I'm talking about communication. That's the key. Okay, I'm done.
Well, that was extraordinarily raw and courageous. And agile. Thank you, Tim.